Hey there everyone, I'm Don, Professor Goway, and welcome to the GowayPro Travel Tales Podcast. Travel far and travel often.
Where are you based at the moment? You in South Africa? You in Botswana?
I am in the UK at the moment. That is why there is no natural light available.
Yeah, fair enough. Hey, you should come to Toronto. Same thing right now.
Yeah, I'm sure the same thing. But at least you get snow. Okay. We just get sludge.
Yeah, I've lived in the UK on and off over the years. Yeah, like I love England. I think it's wonderful. We used to live up in the country, up in actually, we'll bring this into the conversation.
Yep.
So let's get started. Okay, here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Goway's Travel Tales podcast series. Today we are heading to Southern Africa, and a country that maybe a lot of people don't consider when they look at Africa, or particularly Southern Africa, and that being Botswana. So we are going to talk about Southern Africa and Botswana, but my guest today is a gentleman, Peter Allison, who we just spoke off air. He's actually based in the UK at the moment and just got back from Botswana, he said, literally with 48 hours ago. So he's probably, Peter, you're probably a little bit jet lagged as well at the moment.
It's not too bad. It's only a 2-hour time difference. It's just... I don't sleep on big aircraft.
You don't?
Put me in a little Cessna and I'm out. But
oh, really?
Yeah, but I don't know, 300 people around me. What are the chances that they're all good?
A little bit of paranoia creeping in there, I think. So, again, I'm in Toronto. We're talking about Botswana. Peter is in the UK, but I pick up from the accent. You're an Aussie by birth, I would assume.
I am, yeah. I was born in Australia, grew up in Sydney, but I left as a teenager. Initially, I lived in Japan for a little while, and then at 19, I came to Africa for what I thought would be a year. And that's lasted over, well, I've been a safari guide for 31 years now. And most of that I've actually been based in Africa.
Okay, so let's take a step back there. So Sydney, whereabouts in Sydney? Because that's where I'm from.
This is something I've only recently got around to admitting. I'm originally from the Shire, and I'm a Hobbit. Then I moved from there to Mossman, which is probably the greatest culture shock of my life. And I've lived in every continent except Antarctica.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so I grew up in Coogee, and also spent a lot of time up at Whale Beach, so your neck of the woods, i.e. the northern beaches. So for those who don't know, the harbour, pretty much, you got the northern beaches north of Sydney Harbour and the eastern suburbs, which is south of Sydney Harbour. I know it makes a bit contradictory, eastern suburbs being south, but that's what it was. And then the Shire is even further south. That's sort of down around the sort of Botany Bay area where Captain Cook first landed. So that's the Shire region that Peter's talking about. So what took you to, because we've got a similar story to a degree, because I used to be a tour guide as well, and I went on one of my first big journeys outside of Europe, which most Australians do. I went to Africa as my first big, this not as a guide, just as a holiday. That's where I fell in love with tour leading and Africa as well. So what took you? You said you went to Japan for a year first?
Yeah, that was just, I'd been doing Japanese at high school, and Japan had far stronger tendrils into Australia at that point. I made that thinking I was being clever and securing my future. And I love Japan. I've never been to a country that can revere the ancient and embrace the modern as well as they do. There's so much fascinating history and a fascinating present. But there was something missing for me, and I didn't recognize it at the time. And it was when I was about to turn 19, and I'd been working on boats on Sydney Harbour for a couple of years. And I got promoted to the top job, manager on board, and I thought, this is not what I want to do for my life. I'm going to go to Africa for a year, and I'm going to just travel around, see some animals. I've loved animals my whole life. And then I'll come back and do law. If I don't know what will make me happy, I might as well be rich. And so I jumped on a plane 2 weeks later.
Oh, okay. So I did from my tour leading thing, I did a similar thing. I'd done a couple of trips to Africa as on an overland trip, which I'm sure you're familiar with that terminology. For those who don't know, an overland trip is basically getting a big converted truck and you camp for the most part wherever you travel. So I did a few trips like that, Eastern Africa, Southern Africa, and I thought not so much the wildlife, but that type of job was for me because I had no ties, so to speak, back in Sydney. I did a similar thing. I came back from a second trip. I did that trip with the intention to look at this job seriously because it's all well and good to be on a holiday. Oh, this is so romantic. I could do this for a living. And, so I came back. I did the trip thinking, let's have a close look at it. Came back and thought, yeah, I'm going to do it. And 2 weeks later, same thing. I sold everything I owned, bought a one-way ticket to the UK, which is where this company, Dragoman, you might know, is based. And, then I didn't go home for about 7 years. When I did, it was with a wife and a kid. So, so you went to Africa for the year to travel, and then what led you into my thought process of, I'd like to do this as a living?
No, I think I still consider myself incredibly lucky. I mean, there's this crazy thing where sometimes starting at 12, you're asked to pick what you want to be for the rest of your life. And therefore, if you want to be, you're smart enough to be a doctor, so you've got to do science, you've got to do mathematics, you've got to do this. And at 12-year-old, I didn't have a hair on my body outside of my head. You barely develop physically, let alone mentally. So I think you sometimes get painted into a corner. And I was so lucky to break out of that and to stumble into a career which seemed fantastic in the true sense of the word, as in it was a fantasy. And I got a job while hitchhiking, came via a game reserve and got a job behind the bar because I worked in a bar in Australia, of course. If you never did that in our era, then your parents were probably too rich. And so I knew how to run a bar. I ran a bar in a safari camp, and I thought this was it. My year was made. I was seeing animals just in and around the camp. That's the whole reason I'd come to Africa. And then one day, one of the guides, and these guides in this camp were already my heroes. They were only a year or two older than me in some cases, and I thought they were the coolest people I'd met. They drove Land Rovers. They carried rifles. They could spot animals in a way I couldn't conceive of ever being able to do. One of them got sick and another one hurt his leg, and the manager ran up to me with a rifle in one hand and keys to a Land Rover in another. And he's like, this is it. You got to go out this afternoon. All you do is talk about animals. Just do it behind the wheel.
Wow.
And as you know, it's like that if you grew up in Sydney, the idea of being a safari guide was never something, a guidance counselor, whatever. I can't even remember what we called them. That was not on the table. Most tourism jobs weren't even on the table, which is crazy. It's such a huge employer. And and then 3 hours later, and the crazy thing is, so I grabbed the rifle, grabbed the keys, and I said, okay, but two things. I'm definitely doing this. Yes, 1,000 times yes. This is the first time I've touched a gun in my life. And I've also never driven a car before. Oh, and wow. There's an old saying, a great saying, history's made by people who show up. And I equally think, jobs are given to people at the door. You've just got to be there and you just say, yes, I'll do it. Yep, I'll have a go.
Yeah. Fake it till you make it type thing.
Yeah. And I probably spent 20 years concerned that someone was going to point out I was still faking it. That's 2/3 of my career thus far.
Did you then, through that, being there at the right place, right time type thing, obviously it was something that clicked for you because you loved it and you're still doing it. Have you since then, because my life as a tour guide was basically go over, get interviewed, learn how to fix a truck, the mechanics on it, and then, go out and lead trips around the world. There was very little outside the mechanical training. There was very little training. You had to be a good people person. You had to be able to react and deal with certain situations, natural disasters, police, bribery, all the stuff that goes with traveling in what would be termed third world countries. And there was no training for it. Not that you could really train for that anyway. So after this first experience of guiding, right, here's the car, here's the gun, I would assume over the years, as the tourism industry has changed, did you get formal qualification? Did you go to a guiding school, or you then just learned as you went?
I scraped through as probably the last generation of guides where it wasn't just that formal training wasn't required, it wasn't available. And there are now so many schools, and this is a good thing that these have come into place.
Yeah,
every country now, pretty much. There's a couple of exceptions. Guides need to be licensed. They need to be examined. They need to prove their abilities, and those abilities aren't. The mechanical side is one thing. That those practical aspects, the knowledge is another side. Your ability to interact with humans is the all important one, and probably the one you can't train. I don't know that you can train an introvert to be a people person, but there's still jobs for them in the field. There's work to be done in research and conservation where you don't have to be saying yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full sir. And perhaps like you, it was just I had the ability to fake it until I made it, and I was. It might sound like some bravado. It wasn't that. I was terrified, and I did my first trip this year to Central West Africa, to Chad, and I was very filled with trepidation going into that. But I suppose where I'm lucky is that my curiosity is just that bit stronger than my fear. And when an opportunity like that presents, I say yes, and straight away my heart starts racing. But what would be so much worse is not going, not seeing what's over the horizon, what's around the corner. And that's what kept me going all these years.
Yeah, 100%. And it's interesting you bring that up because one of the things that we did as overland drivers too is you'd often, the way it was structured, you go out with an experienced leader first. They'd show you the ropes, little ins and outs and stuff like that. Then you'd get comfortable with it, and then you would lead the trip, depending what region it went to. But what I found through the years is that there are basic concepts of any tour leading job you need to know, like the rules and certain logistics. But it's the experience that really starts giving you the comfort, the confidence, and the credibility with your guests, because you know what you're talking about, because you've seen the Lions do this so many times, or the road system here, or how a bribe system works in Peru, or whatever it may be. But I remember I spent a lot of my time in Latin America, very, very comfortable. And then I was offered a trip from London to Kathmandu and back. And I thought, to your point, something different, a little bit nervous, but I had a tour leader who'd done it before. So you had that comfort blanket. But on the way back, they asked me to run a section, what we would term blind. So neither of us had gone into Syria and Jordan at the time. This is many years ago, before the conflict. So I had to drive through these two countries, never being there before, nor had my co-driver. And it was, to your point, I was nervous because your guests expect you to know what's going on. If you've never been there, you don't know. But the challenge was there, as you say. I had to drive across deserts and stuff like that. And it was fantastic. And I love the challenge. So I really, what's the word? I can't think of the word. But I understand what you're saying with that, challenge over the horizon, try something new, try something different. And as you say, an Aussie boy coming out who just wanted to travel, and all of a sudden you're a tour guide in Africa, taking on those challenges must have been exciting for you. So 20-odd years later, you're now what you would term, what I would call you without any hesitation, a professional safari guide. And again, this is just to fill in your background to our listening audience. I understand you're also an author, and you work in the marketing department of one of our partners who look after lots of lodges in Southern Africa. We'll get into this in a minute. We're going to focus on Botswana today. So how did the author side of your career come up?
My mother was a journalist. Her father was a journalist. Both of them Sydney Morning Herald, which I'm sure you know.
Oh, really?
And,
okay.
I grew up in a newspaper office, sick days from school. My mother didn't have a choice. She was a single mum. And so often grew up in a newspaper office surrounded by words, and our house was full of books, both my parents' readers. And as a kid, I used to look at this book on the shelf. It was the biggest book on the shelf. And I thought, I'm going to read that one day. And it was War and Peace. I finally did when I was 16. But for me, it was my mother had written books, her father had written books, her cousin had written books. I wanted a little bit to carry on that legacy. But again, it's these unexpected consequences of saying yes to opportunity sitting around a campfire, which doesn't happen anywhere near as often as it used to, and that's a great shame. But sitting around a campfire, you tell stories, and they're true stories typically. People don't want to hear your stories of dragons and whatever else it might be, but as a safari guide, and particularly one who came in without training, you've got stories because the worst experiences make the best stories, and the most highly trained people don't make mistakes. Astronauts are so highly trained, they tend not to have great stories to tell. And in my case, I had all these stories of making mistakes, the misadventures, and sitting around a campfire, you tell them, and you can see when people start yawning and they're ready for bed, or the bits that have them leaning forward. And eventually I wrote one of them down, and it was fun to do it, to write. So I wrote another, and I realized there was a book. So I'd always imagined I'd write a book one day, never knew where to start. And then I realized I didn't have to start with my childhood, with getting on a plane. I could just start in the middle of being a safari guide, and the readers could figure out how I got there. And it was a lot of fun. And the first book in particular, it's in about 14, 15 languages, and carries on selling. So I've written 2 books about travel, being a safari guide, and a third one about my equally incompetent travels through South America.
Oh, really? Oh, so you've been to South America. Good to hear.
Yeah, I spent 2 years there, willfully homeless.
Oh, were you guiding or just traveling?
Just traveling.
Oh, really? That's
yeah.
Africa is your thing. Like, I love Africa. I was just there again. People who've listened to these podcasts will know I was there earlier this year. This year being 2025. I love Africa as well, but my passion is Latin America. Because that's where I guided most of my time, and I love it. Oh, it's cool. So 2 years backpacking, I guess, type thing around South America. Mm-hmm.
And went to London, and just before she dumped me, dinner with a World Travel Mart is on. It's a big travel conference every year.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
And I thought, a bunch of my friends from Africa will be there. Linked up with them, and there was a lot of red wine. And when I woke up in the morning, I think I'm back in the safari business. And called a friend. I was like, do we work together again? He's like, yeah. So what am I doing? I said, you're in marketing now. I was like, oh, okay. And that was
So is that the job you're in now?
Yeah. So my main day job is promoting, first of all, African travel. We're not blessed with the greatest tourism boards on the continent. Some are definitely better than others. And so sometimes, we're going to be talking about a few of these places, but we've just opened a new property in Mbamba, for example. And before I can tell people about that, I've got to explain it's in the Okavango Delta. I'm not going to tell them where that is, which is in Botswana. And as you mentioned right at the start, Botswana is one of those countries where at the start of the Olympic parade every 4 years, you go, oh, there's one we haven't heard of before. And then 4 years later, you say it again. And so I've got to promote Botswana before I can get down to that. But luckily, with someone like Goway, I'm talking to experts. I don't have to begin with a map of the world. They've got plenty of those and plenty of expertise. So it's great. I get to come in and dive straight into what it is that makes it special. And then my other job is I still lead people on trips, occasional group trips, but mainly taking families, groups of friends on safari, and not just Botswana and Namibia. I did a trip to Chad this year, as I mentioned, Rwanda, anywhere where the client wants to go.
So you just touched on a few questions I was going to ask. So in your experience in Africa, and again, these podcasts won't be back to back, but I just got off a podcast where I was speaking to our partners who look after our gorilla trekking in Rwanda and Uganda. And I spoke to them about how, not so much anymore because of the gorillas, but they, as a destination, taking the gorillas out of it, because that's obviously a big draw for those two countries, they're overshadowed by Kenya and Tanzania. They're sort of the bigger general destinations people will go to. in Southern Africa, most people are going to hit South Africa as it's probably got the better brand recognition than Namibia and Botswana, and Zimbabwe's been through troubles over the years, which has turned people off that, which is all better now, or getting better. So I know this because I've been there a few times. When you pitch Botswana on the assumption people know that it's in Southern Africa, what's the biggest difference that you would pitch to someone about why they should consider Botswana?
For me, Botswana is, so I'm obviously of a certain generation, and the listeners might be a broad spread of ages, but when you're first perhaps getting intrigued by Africa, it's typically not a brochure, it's something you watch on TV. It's a BBC documentary, and Netflix is increasingly making great documentaries. And no matter where it's filmed, Kenya, Tanzania, Botswana, Uganda, what you see is often a bit of a false image of this boundless area. You kind of feel like Africa's a sea of wildlife with little pockets of humanity. In fact, it's increasingly humans with little islands left of wildlife. Then you get to Botswana and we have what we call concessions. These are privately leased pieces of land. The government administers them on behalf of the people. We're not chasing people out of land they've lived in. And they're huge. I mean, you hear these numbers being bandied around of 200,000 hectares, and it's really hard to put your head around that. But that's 4 times the size of Singapore. And that's relatively common for us. And in that, we'll have 2 or 3 camps. That's it. And the biggest of those might have 10 rooms. So really for me, Botswana and Namibia is the same as this, and perhaps even on a bigger scale. Both of these are huge countries with just over 2 million people each. Before you worry about what the bed's like, before you worry about what the bathroom's like, the greatest luxury is space. And that's really for me where it all begins. Nobody arrives in Africa with the fantasy of seeing 50 vehicles around a cheetah. And I'm not wanting to denigrate any other destinations. There's certainly special places and things, and definitely people in every one of these countries. But for me, Botswana's the Africa that was in my head growing up, and it was the first one I found that really delivered on that.
Would you say then that Botswana, okay, tell me how to phrase this. So you've already passed on Botswana due to its size. There's probably less traffic than its bigger neighbours. Is it also less traffic because it is less known? I believe, correct me if I'm wrong here, it has a reputation of being a little bit more expensive than other safari destinations. And the reason I bring that up is because on our recent trip down to South Africa where we went, and I interviewed our account manager who just went to Kenya, we sort of both had opinions on private game reserves versus national parks. And you get very sport in the private game reserve because if it's well run, which the ones we were at were exceptionally well run, is you feel as if you have the wildlife somewhat to yourself. There's not the big crowds. There's not the 50 vehicles around a spotting. When we went into Chobe, into the national park, we came across a pride of lions, and the difference in experience was fantastic. Don't get me wrong, but it was noticeable in that we'd gone from 2 cars at a spotting and quiet to 20 cars racing down a road to get to the pride and then racing ahead of the pride. It was manic. It was chaotic. The experience was still amazing because you were with the pride of lions. So Botswana would offer that. Again, you said the concessions. Does Botswana offer that more solitude experience due to its size and due to the fact that, because when I asked the question about being a bit more expensive, you sort of nodded your head. So let's tackle that first. Is Botswana more expensive than its neighbours, first of all?
The one-word answer, typically yes. And part of that is you are more remote. And this is also true of Namibia. Just getting to these places, I've had incredible safari experiences in South Africa, but like you're describing, and even this can be in a private reserve in South Africa, but where there's still there's maybe only 3 vehicles at the sighting because they're very well managed. It's respectful of the wildlife. They've been doing it a long time. But then there's a ticking clock. So if you're with lions and they're getting ready to hunt, but you're told after 20 minutes we need to make way because there's a queue of vehicles lined up, again, that's not the Africa in your head. So you do need to push further afield. And for a start, it's not cheap just to get to Botswana. There's many ways. Flying up from Johannesburg, from Cape Town, across from Victoria Falls is a really good way and probably the most cost effective. And then once you get into these private areas, yes, you pay more. But the thing to bear in mind, and this is now me talking more as a marketer, I suppose, than as a guide, and it was an exercise I did, was some of these rooms, people go, oh, it's so expensive. How can it be $1,500 a night to stay at this place? And I'm talking US dollars as well. And that's nowhere near the top price. Some of them are crazily priced. But if you were to say, I'm experience driven, my luxury is experience, and it doesn't matter what the stock market does, that never leaves my account, the experiences I've had. And that's the kind of person I am, and I'm going to take a stab you are as well, where we work in tourism, so we're probably not threatening Elon Musk.
For sure.
But what a wealth of experiences you've got from all your years guiding and driving blind into Syria and Jordan, and also had the pleasure of being to both of those places as well.
Right.
But this wealth of experiences, it's incredible. And if that's what drives you, you can come into Botswana, pick a property that is promoting its wildlife rather than its amenities. And even then you're going to have a room and say, how much would a room this size cost in Manhattan or Sydney, where we're both from? And I guarantee you a room that size will probably cost more. Plus, we're going to feed you relentlessly. You do not lose weight on safari.
Yeah, for sure. You
can drink till you're gurgling. I don't recommend it because it's hot and you're dehydrated already potentially, and also you're going to be woken up early. But enjoy your gins and tonics. Enjoy your red wine, your white wine, whatever your tipple is, or don't drink alcohol at all. Just drink all of the amazing fruit drinks and smoothies that the camp will make. The food has really changed a lot in the time I've been doing this. So the value for money, if you were to take that exact same rate, $1,500, and say, I'm going to do it in New York, the moment you walk out the front doors of that hotel, they don't care what happens to you. That's only what happens through the front doors and up and down the elevators that they care about. We're looking after you every single minute of every single day. We're making sure you're having the most incredible experiences, eating wonderfully. And I suppose it's interesting, I just traveled with a first timer on safari, and that's a new thrill of mine, because now that I've been doing this for 3 decades, is actually kind of sitting back and watching it through somebody's eyes who's experiencing it for the first time. And a huge highlight, if you're prepared to engage other people, as it should be everywhere you travel. And just, it was really refreshing to be with someone that would chat to the people who were bringing us drinks, who were bringing us dinner, who were taking us on the safaris. And you start learning about what life is like in a contemporary African village. And it's fascinating. And this is, so many people come saying, I'm here because I've loved elephants my whole life, and they leave loving the people. That was actually a bigger highlight in some cases than the animals. We actually had a berserk safari. We got all these rarities. We saw 2 aardvarks. We saw a pangolin. That's
oh, wow.
Stuff for a first timer.
Yeah. No kidding.
And so that's a real thrill for me. So the idea that Botswana, yes, Botswana is expensive, but I suppose to wrap this up, it's still great value.
Yeah, I think it is as well. And a key aspect to it, other than the point you brought up about the experiences, which are invaluable, and we could go on tangents about that subject matter. And, travel is, well, to me and my wife, and in turn our kids, is as important as a formal education. But, there's just, as you mentioned earlier about Botswana itself, there's logistics. Like these camps just don't pop up organically. Like all the stuff's got to be shipped in there to build them, to supply them. So there's just logistical costs, which does push up the price in Botswana. But again, back to your point, you're going to a country in an area where you'll have probably less people around you, particularly at sightings and things like that. So it's worth keeping that in mind. And I used to say to, when I was looking after Latin America here, people would ring up about the Galapagos or an Amazon experience, and they'd be fixated on the boat, the vessel they're going to be on. Does it have this? Does it have that? And again, like if that's what you want, that's what you need, and your budget can afford it, and you like the 5-star, go for it. Like we have it there. I know Botswana has, as you mentioned, really luxurious options as well. But our counter to the obsession with the vessel or the hotel or the camp in this case would be you're going to spend most of your time out of it. You're going to be on safari. You're going to be somewhere else. When you come back, like a cold beer is a cold beer, and a 3-star camp or a 5-star camp is still going to have probably have viewing areas over water holes or wildlife, and you'll probably be able to sit out on your balcony at nighttime, whether it's a tented camp or a 5-star lodge, and hear or see the animals at night. So I guess my point here is to our travel partners is don't let your clients get overly obsessed with all the bells and whistles of their camp or the dollar value of the camp. Back to quote Peter here, it's the value of the experiences that they're going to encounter. And Botswana, by its location, by its size, offers something different than its surrounding neighbours. And I'll let Peter expand on this a bit more now. It's also the environment, whereas Southern Africa, I'm going to exclude Namibia here which is very desert focused experience, or can be. The classic Tanzania, Kenya, South Africa is your TV type safari, the plains of Africa, whereas the Delta for the most part is this huge water basin fed by the mountains in Angola, I believe. So it's a completely different wildlife experience. So Peter, can you expand on that aspect of Botswana?
Yeah, and it's so Kenya, Tanzania, that region where Swahili is spoken widely, gave us the word safari. It's Swahili, and it means to go on a journey. It doesn't mean to sit in your butt while somebody points things out to you and you watch and you listen. So one of the great things when you're in Botswana, and the two main areas that we are specialists in are the Okavango Delta, a huge wetland, a Switzerland-sized wetland in the Kalahari. It's formed by a river, the biggest river in the world that doesn't reach the ocean. It gets bounced into the Kalahari by fault lines and creates this enormous oasis. And then just to the south of that, you have something called the Makari Pans. You just say Makari Kari if you don't want to do that. Who does? But those pans, it's the biggest network of salt pans on Earth. You'd know uni salt pan well. This makes uni look like a table condiment. It's enormous. And uni is the single biggest pan. Like I said, this is a network. Between those two, the activities on offer, and I actually tallied this up recently, and I found 16 different ways that you can go on safari. From what you'd expect, being an open 4-wheel drive, to quad bikes or ATVs, depending on where you're from, what you call them, horseback, helicopters, and none of these things are mandatory. Like nobody's going to compel you onto a horse if, like me, you don't trust them. Because my car is not afraid of a plastic bag. It's not going to kick me out if it sees something it doesn't like. My wife's a professional equestrian, so it's a strange attitude for me to have.
Oh, okay. But touchy subject.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so we've got dugout canoes, we've got motorboats. There's so many ways. And again, if we talk about a richness of experience where ideally you come back from your trip to Botswana, for example, and when someone says, what was the highlight, you lost for words. That's ideal, because there's just so much that you've not just seen, but done. Because I firmly believe your best memories, the ones you treasure the most, are the things you did, not just the stuff that you watched. So again, just recently on this trip, out with the San people or Bushman people, this is one of the two oldest cultures in the world that hasn't changed, along with the native Australians. And what you're seeing is a window into Stone Age history. It's pretty amazing. And it's very, very respect. They actually run the activity. They're showing you what they want. It changes every single time you go out. And I've done it many, many times and learn something new every single time. And so that's the kind of thing where you end up just connecting with people that maybe weren't even on your radar before the trip began. You just saw it as something on the list of things you might do while you're there. And you come in and you say, I just not just watched people make fire with sticks. I tried it myself. And you realize what a skill it is. It's a skill as difficult as driving an F1 car or flying a fighter jet. You know, all the tech we've got there. Try rubbing sticks together and making fire. It's really, really hard. These people are experts.
So, on the cultural side, getting back to Botswana, I believe it's the Kalahari Bushmen. Are they within the Botswana region? Am I correct in that?
Yeah. So again, there's the major centre of those that remain are Botswana, Namibia, and northern South Africa. There's a very closely related ethnic group in Tanzania called the Hadzabe. Very similar lifestyles, similar linguistically and physiologically. And that's it. You know, these are isolated populations of the first people of Africa. And so it's like I said, it's a real window into the past, meeting them in a way where you get to learn. You get to learn and have fun. You know, nothing's a lecture. They have a version of rock, paper, scissors. And this is the one thing I see them do every time, is because they have so much fun playing it. And it's just really joyful. And you kind of trying to figure out the game. And maybe after a few minutes, I think I'm following what happens here. Like I said, like rock, paper, scissors, they do a bit of theatre and then they throw their hands out. And if the hands are you and your opponent are diagonal, then one side's won. If it's straight on, then the other side has won. And
right.
They're playing it so rapidly, and then the theatrics of the victory kind of dance as it is are hilarious, and you're joined in, and you think, wow, this is not what I expected from a safari. I thought a safari was about saying, is that a warthog or a bush pig? And it's not that. Right. It's being involved.
And that's an important aspect of travel in general, but a safari as well, to bring up, because more and more people are looking for the more cultural immersion or interaction on a trip. So this is the beautiful thing about Africa in general, but obviously Botswana is not lacking in this. There are cultural immersions or interactions that can be added into your itinerary as well. If someone was to say to someone who's not that well versed in Africa in general and throw out the word migration, probably their first thought's going to be Kenya, Tanzania for the famed Great Migration of primarily the wildebeest, and then the famous scenes of zebra and wildebeest being crossing rivers and being attacked by the big Nile crocs. But I understand there is also a rather large migration that happens in and around Botswana, which is the zebra or zebra, depending on your pronunciation, migration. Can you expand on that a little bit?
First of all, I'm going to call point of order here. It's zebra.
Okay.
It's zebra. And the reason you say that is you have no friends called Debra. You might have some called Deborah, but none are called Debra. You get slapped if you call them that. And so it's zebra. The Spanish call them zebra. I'm trusting the Spanish. So the Mara Serengeti, like you said, it's famous. And for a long time, because of South Africa's political situation, documentary crews certainly weren't in South Africa, but that was your access point to other places. So a lot of what we grew up watching on TV was all filmed Kenya, Tanzania.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's a bunch of myths that are being perpetuated from, the old the old National Geographic theme.
Oh, yeah.
You got it. I'm really showing my age here. But and not they weren't saying anything wrong. It's just it's specific to that place. What we've got in Botswana is something a bit different, where those salt pans I mentioned, every year there's a gathering of wildlife there. So for most of the year, it's a stark, incredibly difficult place to live. Not a lot grows there. It's very rich in minerals that don't let grass grow through. Very low rainfall, about the same rainfall as Vegas. So it's a semi-arid area. But when it does rain, all of those minerals grow grass that is so rich in nutrients that animals come from all over the Kalahari for them. And we go from a handful of zebras to tens of thousands. I think this year they estimated 50 to 60,000 zebras were there. Historically, it was 10 times that. And a big part of what we're doing, and this is a really important point to make, every time someone visits, 1.5% of the money that we bring in, before we even talk about profit, we put away for conservation, and that includes research. And we helped co-fund some research that showed that this wasn't like the Mara, where these zebras are in a constant swirl, but they're always together or loosely together. This is like people coming from Florida and, from places like Connecticut and Chicago and Seattle into Florida every winter. These guys are doing in summer, and they're coming from the Delta, they're coming from the Chobe River, they're coming from the Batete, and they gather in the pans, fatten up, like you might do in Florida, and then they disperse back to their places they're from. And by understanding that through research, it's now protecting the corridors. And it's a rare good news story that the numbers now, by protecting these corridors, the numbers of zebras are growing exponentially. They're faster than poachers or predators can take them out. In our lifetime, we're probably going to have 500,000 zebras turning up. And it's going to be, it's going to be extraordinary. I mean, we're seeing it already. And the wildebeest come from another area, so that's the next project. And so just something for people who are considering a safari, straight away by coming out, you're a philanthropist. So you're helping support research, conservation. You're helping provide employment to rural populations, because we typically employ from the villages closest to where we operate or a little further beyond. And these are people who otherwise, if they wanted a job, would have to travel to a city, where straight away they're the one of those derisive terms for someone from the country is, and I can't even think of one, but they're the yokels. I don't know if that's a widely used term. Instead, they're given a place to really shine. This is an environment they know and understand, and they flourish in it. They get skills that then give them better opportunities. And straight away, again, by visiting, you're telling the government, protect this place. It's worth more as it is than underneath a eucalyptus farm or a mine. And it's worked really well. The governments of these countries are saying, this is important. And, animals don't vote. So we have to give an economic or political reason for them to stick around.
You pretty much paraphrase a statement that our owner here, Bruce Hodge, makes. Exactly that. He says, well, you quoted directly the first part, animals don't get a vote, so someone's got to look after them. So on the rainfall situation, with climate change and everything else, is the rainfall pretty much on time every year to date? Have you had issues where you're not getting the rain to bring up the grasslands?
It's definitely less reliable than it was. And you go into there's a little town in northern Botswana called Maun.
Maun.
Donkeys and dust. And you speak to the men with long grey beards. And there's, it's not like the old days. And as I get closer in age to them than to the age I was when I first arrived. And I remember when it was end of November, start of December, first rains, end of March, the rains switched off like a hard turn tap, or force it, as the Americans would say. And about 2 years ago, I got bucketed on in June, and it was cold rain. You never get cold rain in Botswana, or you never did. And it wasn't significant. It's quite strange, and again, just there with the first timer. And she was marveling at how the rain falls in these really isolated, you can see it. You can watch rain falling. You can watch that cloud patch move and just drive around it. It's not something I've seen much outside the Kalahari. So you could have a place that is two places. Well, we've got camps and they're 2 kilometers apart, and they register wildly different rainfall, even across the average for the year.
Wow. So if someone wants to focus their trip around the migration of the zebra, how do you, like in the Maasai and the Serengeti, you take your 4-wheel drives to certain lookout points and at the river crossing, the chutes. And again, because it's an annual event or cycle, I should say, not an annual event, it cycles around. You can choose your spots throughout the year.
Yep.
So in Botswana for the zebra, how does that work? Is it literally you fly into a particular area to view them? Is it 4-wheel drive?
Yeah.
It's all the things you mentioned before, helicopter, quads, the whole thing.
Yeah, so if you were to come to the Pans, like I just did now, so the first 2 weeks of December are the least traveled time on Earth. Fewest number of people traveling, and that's why I love it. So I was there specifically for that. And the zebras were in and en masse, and the tourists were not. Obviously, then it spikes again over Christmas, New Year, and then January goes back to being quiet in Botswana. Whereas Cape Town is mental. Cape Town is absolutely packed in January. So it shows that there are still people traveling. But if you come there to those Pans in January, you get the zebras, plus you get flamingos start to arrive. Those are best seen from the air. The zebras you can see from the ground or from the air in a helicopter. And it's really up to you as to what kind of travel you want to do. And sometimes budget intervenes. The most famous camp in those Pans is Jack's camp. And people see it, and it's a spectacular looking camp. And then they see the price point, get a bit of sticker shock and go, oh, maybe after we've won the lottery. And it's such a shame because there are other properties in that area. And one of the things that we do at Natural Selection is we try to give different price points. And you've still got the chance. If your main aim was outside of the camp, again, coming back to what we spoke about, if you're seduced by experience rather than objects, the stuff of a safari, Camp Kalahari, you're going to see the same meerkats, the same zebras, and they don't find the rich any more appealing. So you're going to go out and a meerkat will still come and sit on your shoulder or your head. And the zebras will still pass by in their thousands. They don't take a wide curve around you because you're not wearing Prada.
Yeah, I like how you put that, because it's true. And that goes back to what I was saying before. It doesn't matter about the type of accommodation for the most part, unless it's something very specific. Your experiences will be, well, not identical, because nothing's ever identical with wildlife, but the opportunities to see and experience will be the same no matter where you're staying for the most part. There are some exceptions to that rule, but for the most part, that's the case. So on the subject of camps, Natural Selections has a very large portfolio across multiple countries, but we're going to focus on Botswana, obviously. So can you maybe just go through not the top from a price point of view, but your top 5, top whatever, or unique camps that you offer and why they're unique compared to, because you mentioned Jack's being accessible for the migration.
Jack's is an icon, and we're a little different. We're not like a hotel chain. We partner with family-run businesses. So the eponymous Jack Balsfeld, he passed away a few decades ago, but his son Ralph runs Jack's and some of its sister properties. He owns half, we own half, and he's a genius in the bush. He's literally a PhD. And then outside of it, and I say this because he's a friend of mine, he's somewhat of a disaster. So we basically make sure that the tents are full. He makes sure everybody has a fantastic time, and it's a really good partnership. And because our company was founded and is run by people who are all safari guides, we speak the same language. And his previous partners have said, Ralph, you're an idiot, be quiet. We've said, Ralph, you're an idiot, let's build it, because that'll be fun.
Right.
And that's the kind of thinking that we have is conservation is deadly serious. I spoke about that 1.5%, where that's the foundation of our company. But we're selling vacations, holidays, not insurance. People, we got to come and enjoy themselves and have fun. Bring the joy back into this. And our tagline is safaris of character. So throughout all of our properties, we say to our guides, be yourself. You've got a personality, show it. Why not let people meet someone extraordinary and they'll remember your name 10 years from now? What a great thing. What a great impression to make on someone. And if they walk away wanting to be conservationists, brilliant. So along with Jack's that I've just mentioned, there's a great camp called Duke's. Sounds like Jack's with a Dutch accent. That's in the Okavango Delta. The setting of that is just a favorite of mine. You're in an ebony woodland overlooking waterways, but it's not just solid. It's not like looking at the ocean. There's little intrusions of grass and small islands, and there's hippos weaving their way through. There's crocs. You don't always see them. There's otters in there, 2 types of otter in the Okavango. It's a real, what happens quite often somewhere like Duke's is you look at a scene or a landscape, and it's like you've asked. I've got a 7-year-old son. If I ask him to draw a picture of Africa, all the animals are going to be in one place. There'll be giraffe and zebras and hippos and lions and elephants. That you'll actually get there, and that's it's almost comical, and you're now kind of laughing, going, maybe there's not the 500,000 zebra crossing a river like you get in the Mara, and that is its own spectacle. Nothing can match that. It's why it's famous. But to sit and to be able to count more than 10 mammal species outside a zoo is pretty remarkable.
Oh, very much so. Yeah. So in your portfolio of properties, I would assume that you have budget ranges from 3 to, again, we've already discussed you have the luxury options there. But if someone's on more of a budget, have you got options for them to consider?
Absolutely. And there's the mobile safaris, which you mentioned, not quite that Dragoman level, but up from that, private campsites and so on, through to properties where, and I've met billionaires in our lowest tier of properties, and the star ratings don't quite work because there isn't always a hairdryer in the drawer. Actually, there is. But they, because it is so different to a hotel, to truly achieve I think it's a 3-star rating, you need to have a rail or a clothesline that pulls out inside the shower. That doesn't work in a tent. We have bathrooms, we have flush toilets, we have hot water, always available. The food is fantastic, but you can't get a hotel rating because we're built out of canvas and timber. And I like that. We've all tried to figure out ways, and we give different designations to them, but figure out why you're coming. And there's nothing wrong with saying, I like my luxuries and I can afford it. Mm-hmm. And why not have it? Why not be Jack's Camp, which we've mentioned a few times now? The room is 130 square meters. Sorry, I can't convert that to feet. There's the rooms are epic between Tuludi and Jack's, North Island, Okavango, and Tawana. These places are spectacles in themselves. They can all be torn down in 24 hours. That's the rule in Botswana.
Interesting.
But anything can in 24 hours if you get enough manpower. But we're not allowed to use concrete, so it's all very eco. But then last time I went with my wife to Botswana, we've got one area where we have Tuludi, Sable Alley, and Little Sable. And Little Sable is the entry level, and my wife fell in love with that. So quite often it's just a matter of taste. And again, this is where both you and I are lucky. As travel increasingly goes online, I think a safari is the last place that's internet proof, because you've got to learn who the person is and figure out What is it they want to see outside the room? What is it they need from inside the room? And match that up. And AI is nowhere near being able to do that yet. And then make sure that the next place they go to is different enough to be worth the travel, worth packing and unpacking. And Africa really needs expertise. It's not like one of these resort destinations where it's so easy to do it online. Yeah, it's a fun, really fun place to be involved with.
Yeah, and I'd extend that statement across most of the destination Goway goes to, because we're not a resort seller, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you like your resorts, you like your resorts. But to your point, at least in my lifetime, I don't think AI will ever be able to capture what you just described, because I think, regardless of being in the industry, if someone's asking you about, and that's why I'm enjoying the conversation with you, if someone's asking about a safari experience in Botswana or Chad or wherever it may be,
yep.
like speaking to you who knows their, SH, etc.
Yep.
That's a huge difference than, like, AI might spit back the facts of Botswana, of Chad, of Namibia, but going back to part of our earlier conversation, the stories that you would have and would pass on, which would inspire me and our travel partners out there and in turn their clients, AI will never, ever, ever capture, at least, again, not in my lifetime. So that just brings, one, having expertise out there through Goway and in turn our partners like Natural Selections and by extension Peter, but also the type of travel, because it's not cookie cutter. Like we've said it many times, each trip will give you a different experience. And yeah, I think it's vitally important to keep that in mind when you're selling a destination, and particularly somewhere like Africa. And as we've discussed, just within Southern Africa, South Africa, Namibia, Zimbabwe, and Botswana, there's crossover, but they are so uniquely different in themselves. Okay, Pete, so I think we should probably start wrapping up now. Is there anything you'd like to let our listening audience know? And again, you are talking to our travel professionals out there. So anything that's, one, inspirational, because I found a lot of what you said today very inspirational. And even as a travel person who's traveled a lot, you've got, I haven't been to Botswana for a long time. I'd love to get back there. So either anything inspirational or not factual per se, but important when they're trying to position Botswana when they're talking to their clients?
Oh, that's a great question. And I'm going to go back to when I mentioned the Olympics, and a lot of people haven't heard of Botswana. So you've got to be a curious person to turn up there. It suits the curious. And you're going to meet people who are from a village and they've learned how to make a perfect flat white or cappuccino. So embrace that. And I think that's great. But then also, if you're a curious person, you should ask the question, why haven't I heard of Botswana? And the reason you haven't is it's doing really well. Countries in trouble are on the news. The reason you've never seen Botswana on the news is because things are going pretty well there. Obviously, every country has its problems, filled with humans, and humans have their problems. But a country that's not on your CNN or Fox News, depending on which poison you drink, that's probably the place you want to go to be able to have that mixture of incredible experiences, learning a lot, but also feeling safe. I mean, we don't want to go to a dangerous area, particularly not if you're traveling with a family, but it's nice to have a thrill, but as long as you know it's in a really safe place. And that's what I really feel we deliver on.
Yeah, and that's a fair statement, because most news will only give you the bad side of whatever it may be.
Leads.
Yeah, exactly. Knowing our audience, so being travel professionals and hopefully many out there sort of knowing Africa, do you still stand by that statement from a tourism point of view? Because like Kenya, Tanzania, South Africa, people hear about from a travel side, but I think back to our opening statements here, a lot of travel professionals don't know about Botswana. Do you think because it's doing well, shouldn't that be a reason why it's being heard within the travel industry, because it is doing well?
You'd hope so. And I think so when I first moved to Botswana, mid 1990s, we didn't have any first timers. Everybody was on their third or fourth trip to Africa, and the whispers got louder as they met more fellow travelers. It wasn't travel professionals telling them about it. It was the people they met while on their first or second or third safari. And now more and more it's become, I wouldn't call it mainstream necessarily, but there's enough people who've been visited said this delivers on everything that the people want. This can be a place that we send our clients for their first ever safari. Their clients become our guests. And it does. It is a destination for those who've been before or those who've never been. Though I did actually have a travel professional recently say to me, he said, Botswana's a problem. Because once we've sent people there, we don't know where to send them next because they're so spoiled. Ooh. They're spoiled by that feeling of timelessness. There's nothing.
That's a big statement.
Here it is. And I'm not saying don't send us your first timers. I'm just saying the caveat is they're going to love it so much that other places might not match up to it later on. That sounds really cocky, but I'm standing by it.
Yeah, I was going to say. Yeah, that is a big statement. Yeah. So actually, on that point, using Latin America or South America as an example, Ecuador and Peru are so well known because they have some iconic sites, Galapagos and Machu Picchu in particular, but also their governments have been very, very proactive, aggressive even over the many years in promoting those two big sites. I'm talking from a travel professional point of view here. When you look at Southern Africa, the big player is South Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, and East Africa from promotions and tourism board pushes. Is Botswana's government and in turn its tourism board as proactive? Does it have the same money to throw around as some of its bigger?
I'm getting on the record here. I feel they've certainly got the budget, but I'm not sure the expertise is always there. And and again, it's a tiny population. We're looking at just over 2 million people in a France or Texas sized nation, and most of the people they just recently appointed a new tourism board with nobody from tourism on it. And yet they're a functioning and a stable democracy. There's so much good to be said about the Botswana government, but they're not prominent. They're not out there. The Rwandans are incredible. They've been doing really well recently at promoting that country. So it's been a private sector effort to get Botswana more known. But then on the other hand, we quite like most of the people working there. Well, our properties are full or close to full, and we struggle in the low season. We struggle when you're outside of the holiday seasons in Europe and North America. But we like the idea of these huge sized pieces of land that we have, and maybe if demand increased, we'd lose that. So this is our little secret that we're putting out on the internet.
Right. So not a random question per se, but what is Botswana's biggest revenue generator? Is it mining? Is it tourism?
Diamonds.
Is it
diamonds?
Diamonds. Yeah. Oh, really?
Botswana's produced a quarter of the world's diamonds every year since, I think it was 1967 or 67. They announced the discovery, but diamonds have recently gone down in value, and that's been a bit of a problem for the country, but they've got foreign reserves stacked up. It's a country where healthcare is close to free, taxation's really low, and things work.
So where does tourism sit within its GDP? Is it up there? It's got to be in the top 5 at least. Or second after diamonds. Wow.
Beef after that. And automotive assembly is 4th.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know. I knew tourism would be up there. I didn't. Again, most people like I did would think diamonds, South Africa, but obviously Botswana's up there. Interesting. Okay then. Okay. Yeah, but as you say, diamonds have gone off the flavour of the month over the last 10 years, I guess. So yeah, that's not going to help them. Okay then. Is there anything else you'd like to pass on to our listening audience about your camps, Botswana in general? I know we'll probably get people hearing you speak, knowing that you are a guide. Can you be requested as a guide on behalf of our travel? A client comes to them and they're a VIP client. Can we through Goway request you? Are you only for certain people? Are there premiums for your services?
There are premiums for my services, as there are with any what we call a private guide or a specialist guide. So if you have, for example, a family, you want someone who's good with kids. And if you've got someone really technically minded, you want someone probably with an appropriate degree. There's people who are particularly skilled in the cultural aspects. So a request might come through for an individual or a personality, but sometimes you might just say, these are the people we've got traveling and we'd like them to be accompanied throughout the trip. And what a private or specialist guide does is act as your ambassador on the trip. Quite often you're asleep while they're awake and you wake up probably just to a WhatsApp and it says, went out, had a great time. This is what we saw. There might be something like Mrs. Smith slipped, bumped her elbow, just needed a plaster, all's okay. But then you get to message Mrs. Smith and she goes, I can't believe you're checking me up in this. And that's incredible. It just gives that integration of your side, as they are your clients, but they are our guests, as I said, but it puts that together. And also that specialist guide is making sure that each camp they come to, it says they're not really into birds. So just show them the big or the colourful and otherwise drive past, or they're really into birds. You don't need to stop for the elephants. If you can show them that little brown guy, explain why it's different to that little brown guy, they're over the moon. And that's what you learn. The hardest day as a private guide is your first day. You're there figuring out who everybody is, the relationships, how to keep everybody happy. Ultimately, whether we're selling Africa or whatever, we often think we're in the wildlife business. We're not. We're in the happiness business. If we can keep people happy, we're doing our jobs well, and we're encouraging people to come back or to recommend it to others. So what you're doing, the staff on the ground are fantastic at it, but you're just giving an extra opportunity for happiness.
Yep, 100%. That's what our industry is about, and it starts from our travel partners out there getting the call from their client. They want to make their client feel special and have that memory of a lifetime. We, in turn, want to pass that on to our travel partner, and we know through the partners we work with, like Natural Selections in Botswana in particular, that we can rely on them to do exactly that make this maybe first-time visit, once-in-a-lifetime visit, never going back visit, truly memorable and special. And Goway stands by private guiding in general, anything from a city tour up to probably the more, not the right word, extreme situation of having a private guide for an extended safari over 3-4 days, 2 weeks even, because as Peter just pointed out, like it'll be truly customized to what the client's interested in. If they don't want to see elephants, then they won't see elephants, or they won't be focused or driven towards that. It'll be toward whatever, to quote Peter, the little brown bird they want to see, because that's all the trip may be about. And again, that's probably, the more extreme option of that is a wildlife safari guide, but even down to a city tour in Maun or wherever it may be. That's what we try and work on, because I've fallen in love with private guiding, because you get what you want, what interests you from your experience, 1 day, 7 day. So I recommend nothing more than looking at private guided services on any destination, on any trip. But obviously through Natural Selections and Goway, you can extend that all the way up to having a private expert safari guide with you for an extended period of time. Okay, so on that note, I'd like to thank Peter for his time. Actually, one question. You mentioned going back to the UK in your younger years was a place you got dumped by your girlfriends. You're in the UK now. You did mention for this podcast you were going to get the wife to clear out the kids. So your wife, you mentioned she's an equestrian professional. Can I ask how you guys met? Was she, because my wife was a passenger of mine on a trip. Is that your situation as well?
No, that's a tale as old as time, and the infamous khaki fever. But it was actually off the back of one of the books I wrote, and she was a journalist for a magazine and interviewed me about that. and it took me about 2 years to make a move, but we somehow kept corresponding. There were so many follow-up questions. And I don't believe the article ever made it to print. But then finally I got drunk enough to suggest that we could have something more than correspondence, and incredibly she was charmed by that. And been married 11 years now.
Is she English, Aussie,
she's
Botswana?
English, yeah, which is why we're in the UK, but I've got a year left on my sentence and I can go to a country with nature.
Oh, okay. Well, what's the year on the sentence? Just as an agreement you come to before you go back to the wilds of Africa, or?
Actually moving back to Australia. It's been 30 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
right.
So I haven't lived there for a long time, but I want my kids to grow up with animals in the backyard and Not they don't have to surf, but just the ocean. The ocean is nature.
Yeah, the ocean, 100%. Yeah, I've got 3 boys who are now young men, and we went through that thought process at one stage of I'd like them to have that Australian upbringing, but circumstances just it never happened. And they got to a point where it was really too late to make that move. So, yeah, good on you. You got 2 kids, I understand?
3. Well, my wife's got 3. I don't know they're all mine, but she claims they are.
Let's hope they are. Okay, and they've all been to Africa at one stage with you and your wife?
Yeah, so the oldest 2 actually lived in Cape Town for a while. We moved to the UK during COVID, and our youngest was born here after one of those lockdown nights of Negronis and nothing else to do. This is probably more not the direction most of your podcasts go, but
Yeah, fair enough.
but so 3.
So just before we do again officially say goodbye, so based on the fact you've taken your kids down to Africa and Botswana by extension is a family-friendly spot that people want to look at if they have a family?
Absolutely. I mean, what an experience. And again, circling back to when we were talking about diversity of experience, if you just take your kids to a place where it's a drive in the morning, a drive in the afternoon, it's like it does underwhelm them. And you don't want to turn them off the experience. But if you're going to places where kids are not just allowed, they're actually welcomed, that's a very different thing. And that is, you're getting them, like I said, we're talking about going out in ATVs, walking with bushmen, getting a meerkat in their head. One of my kids' fondest memories of Botswana was when the guide played a game of soccer with them, but with a dried elephant dropping. And they thought it was the funniest thing they've ever had, and that's what they spoke about at school. And for anybody wrinkling their nose and going, isn't it smelly? These guys are vegetarians. It smells like a circus. It's hay. And and they loved it. And that's and the staff love having kids in camp. Some places work better than others. And again, that's where you speak to an expert to make sure the right places are put forward.
We choose the right camp. Yeah, it's interesting. Like I mentioned this before, my wife's philosophy, I think you'd probably be very similar in attitude that formal education, for sure. We want our kids to do that, and they've done it. But I place, as does my wife, as much value in travel experiences and being exposed to other cultures and ways of life, and that equally with formal education. So we've been proactive in getting our kids out there. Obviously, you have by your lifestyle as well. So I think you've heard, Botswana is I often use it probably too much, a jewel in the crown, hidden gem, all that type of stuff within Southern Africa. I think you've heard through Peter's marketing side of it and also his professional guiding side of it that I think Botswana is a little bit different. Well, it is different by the delta in itself, that being completely different to anything around it. But its size, its space, I think it offers a lot. It's one of my favorite spots. I think it's a destination you should put forward to when a client comes to you about a trip to Africa, not knowing where they should go, east or southern. Throw Botswana up there. It's definitely worth the experience. Not only Peter is available as private guiding options, but his staff or extended staff down at Natural Selections are on hand as well. Your Goway destination specialist can help you guide your clients on their choices, be it country or once they choose Botswana, on all the different camp options that are available, anything from 3-star all the way up to Jack's, which is, the high-end thing down on the salt pans, where you can see a lesser known migration, 50-odd thousand, I think you mentioned was the number of zebra, and growing as things get better down there as well. So Botswana is a great option to consider. Please don't forget about it. Peter, anything else you'd like to leave our audience with before we say bye?
No, I think that's it. We've covered a lot. Thank you very much for having me on.
Our pleasure. It was really interesting talking to you. Really interesting background, life story. It's inspired me, and I hope it inspires everyone out there. And as always, thank you to our travel professionals for giving us their time today. We know how busy you are. And until next time.